Hey guys, welcome to another Kickstarter review. So today I'm going to be doing my full non-spoiler breakdown of Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1. So the basic premise of this film is that you have an AI technology known as the Entity that has the ability to digitally take over the world. And all the intelligence agencies, including Ethan Hunt and his team, are aware of its capabilities and its dangers, and they're on a chase to essentially find this key that it has the ability to destroy the technology. And the Entity is clever. It is able to adapt to Ethan Hunt's every move to essentially stop him at every turn from attempting to destroy it. To summarize my feelings on the film, basically I had very high expectations going in, and coming out of the film I've been forever thinking about it, just really processing how I feel about this film. Overall, I am disappointed, but I do have to still say that it is a good film. My main issues with it is that I believe that the story and a lot of the characters as well, the newly introduced characters, form an overall convoluted plot. And so I'm going to cover the story without going into spoilers, obviously, and then I'm going to break down some of the character moments throughout the film, and then I'm going to summarize my thoughts on this film and what I liked and disliked about it. So starting with the story, as mentioned, this is all surrounding an AI technology that is basically threatening to destroy the whole world, or the world as we know it, and Ethan and his team are racing against time to destroy it. As a premise, I quite like this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that I think it's a very timely subject matter, in that we're currently dealing with AI in the present world and how we're going to, I guess, incorporate it into our lives. And so I think it's very relevant from that perspective. But then also, obviously this is part one of the final two parts of the Mission Impossible series, supposedly. And so I do believe that this AI entity is a fitting villain for the the finale of this whole franchise. We always hear about the next form of warfare basically being digital, and so what greater threat could we possibly have than an AI entity that has the ability to digitally take over the world? And so from that perspective, I think it's quite fitting to have it as the main villain of these two films. And so from a plot perspective, the moments that I enjoyed the most throughout the film were the moments where the AI really showed its power. And so without, spoiling anything, there are moments where it's basically able to manipulate the actions of certain characters based on using the digital web to inform them of certain things and basically change outcomes. And it's really clever stuff. It's great, and it's very, and you really feel the power of its of how threatening it is, really. That's it. There are some inconsistencies throughout in terms of how they manage it from a plot perspective. Like, at times it appears to obviously to do what it does, but then there's other certain moments where it could have appeared but it doesn't, and obviously to fit the plot and to push it in the direction they wanted it to go. So there is some inconsistency from that perspective that I noticed, that I found a bit of a problem. And Mission Impossible films are very well known for their exposition. They always have these like one or two scenes throughout the film where they really kind of come together in a circle and explain what is happening. Basically, it's for the audience, basically, to bring them in and keep them aware of what's going on, or to explain to them what's going to happen. And so we always expect them with these films, but this one really has like 3 exposition scenes within the first, almost felt like half an hour of the film, and I felt that really dragged. And I really felt like this kind of the conversations that were had could have been somehow brought together into one conversation to, like, one, save time, but also just it is almost too much exposition that it was kind of confusing at times to try and remember everything, especially within that brief period. Like, maybe if they spaced these conversations out a bit more, it might have hit a bit better. But yeah, I felt that ultimately kind of like summarizes how I feel about the film, is that it's great in a lot of ways, but it also just kind of can't get out of its own way. It wants to over explain things too much and make a lot of different things happen, which is why the word convoluted comes to mind. As for the characters, I think the cast is great for the most part. Led by obviously Ethan Hunt, and then with his team of guys, and then all the villains introduced, they all do a very good job with what they have, and it's as solid as ever. The Mission Impossible films have kind of been growing their like core group of people with each movie, and this one grows even more again. And even from the villain side, there's even more thrown into it. And so that was one of the problems I have with the film, is that not only have they brought back basically everyone from the previous one, but they've introduced a whole new slate of characters again that we're meant to be invested in and understand, and some of them work and some of them don't. I would say the best achieved one is Hayley Atwell's character Grace, who is one of the main characters in the film. She is a pickpocket, and she basically gets thrust into this situation unintentionally, and she's with Ethan's character throughout the whole film. And so she's very well handled. The villains are where I have my main problem with this film. So you have Isa Morales' character, Gabriel, who is basically he's the main guy who's tied up with the entity and working with it, I guess. And he's introduced in this film as having a sort of backstory with Ethan Hunt, and it does feel forced to me. I won't go into details about it, but it does feel a bit forced. Like, okay, why had we never heard of this guy before if he was so tied up into Ethan's past, but like now all of a sudden he's a big problem? It just feels a bit forced in that regard, but I'm willing to forgive most of that. But other than that, I just felt like because you have the entity as the main villain, and obviously it's a faceless villain, it's almost like they felt like they had to have a face with it. And that probably is true, but if they're going to do that, I think they needed to flesh him out more. And I just don't quite think they did. They tried to do it by making him tied to Ethan's past, but to me, it just didn't work all the way through. Gives a good performance, don't get me wrong, but I think they needed more of him, and maybe they could have done more with him, but they did introduce these other villains as well. One named Paris, played by Pom Klementieff, I think her name is, and she's kind of like an assassin type thing. And then you have Alana, again, back from the previous Mission Impossible film. You've got these other two agents who aren't really villains, but they're after Hunt throughout the whole film. So there's just so many juggling parts to go around that they're trying to give time to all these characters, and ultimately they can't give the amount of screen time that they each need. And they say that the hero is only as good as its villain, and I think they tried to tie the villain into the hero's story and his past, and because for me it didn't quite work, so then therefore I felt like Ethan's character wasn't diminished in any way, but just we didn't really get to learn more about him or really progress his character arc in this franchise. With that all said about the story and characters, I am aware that this is a part one, and whilst it does have a pretty conclusive ending to this part of the story, it doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger, which is good. At the same time, there is still a lot to be paid off for what will obviously be part two next year. And so I am looking forward to that one to see, because I believe if that one lands really well, then it could really change how I feel about this film, which at the moment is kind of skeptical. And obviously this is a Mission Impossible film, so I'd be remiss to not mention the action and what my thoughts on the action in this film. There are really like three main action set pieces throughout the film, and these are no spoilers because they've basically been in the trailer. There's one that takes place in a car chase through Rome. There's a second one that's basically running through the streets of Venice, and then there's obviously the third one which takes place on the train, and obviously includes that base jump that we've seen in the trailers, that he parachutes off a cliff, which is incredible. The action was definitely great, with top-notch choreography, and you could see the level of care they invested into these scenes and the amount of practical effects that they're using. But I was annoyed a couple times where they actually had a really epic scene that was taking place, and it could have even gone to another level, but instead they paid it off with a joke, and that it annoyed me actually quite a bit in both instances, because I felt like could have been such an awesome moment if they paid it off with a genuine badass moment, but instead they paid it off with a joke, and I couldn't help but just think back to the MCU films and the issues they're having where they do similar things where every serious moment has to be undercut by a joke. That's definitely not the case with this film as a whole, but there was just those couple of moments that bothered me, and thought I'd just mention them now. So yeah, to summarize, I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great film. I'm still processing my thoughts. I could still be changing by the time I get to my full spoiler review. But look, it's a good film, and I recommend seeing it, definitely. It's great fun and entertainment in the cinema, great popcorn flick, has a decent premise, great characters. You get exactly what you expect from Tom Cruise and the cast. They're all solid as ever. Ultimately, yeah, as I said, disappointed, but definitely still looking forward to part two and seeing how they pay off this part of the story. Make sure to stay tuned and check out my spoiler review, where I'll give my final score of this film and obviously break down all of the plot and character elements from a full spoiler perspective. So yeah, make sure to come back for that. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.